I'm speaking with Melbourne organist Gordon Atkinson. Gordon was born here in Melbourne in 1928, although he spent much of his life in England and North America. But fortunately for us, Gordon returned to Melbourne in 2005. Your CV is quite an interesting one, sir. Where did it all begin?
It began right here in Melbourne, Ivanhoe Methodist Church, as it then was, now Ivanhoe Uniting Church. My father directed the choir. It was a choir of about 65 singers. They did major works, and I used to wait on a Sunday morning for Miss Horton, the organist, to come in. She'd get her hymn books ready and the voluntary she was going to play. Then she'd bend down and pull on the switch underneath, and I'd hear the blower start. And this was the excitement, waiting.
You knew something was going to happen.
Yeah, it was the waiting for it to start.
Yeah. So how old were you, Gordon?
Oh, 7. 7, because I wanted to play the organ straight away, and my parents said, no, you've got to do piano first, and you've got to reach one of the higher grades. In those days, the grading went from preparatory down to grade 1, grade 1 being the highest you could go before you did your A.E.H or something. So that's what I did, and I got as far as grade 2, and at the age of 14 my parents said I could take organ lessons, so I just had my first lessons with Doris Horton at Ivanhoe Methodist Church.
Now, you've played many of the organs around this city because you have a CD out at the moment.
Yes.
What is it? North
of the Yarra.
North of the Yarra, that's right. From St Pat's to some very, very delicate little organs with the most beautiful, almost lace-like sound.
Yes. Well, that was the start of it, the little organ out at Merlinston.
Oh, yes.
I was driving to see another organ one day with a friend, and I said, let's not go on the main road. And we came across this half-finished church, and where it should have gone to the nave, there was just a glass and metal filling covering it up. You know, the church is not going to be completed further. And I looked inside and saw a little organ, and I thought that should be recorded. Just like, I mean, it was as quick as that. And then, you know, the OTA has a very good site for looking up organs throughout Australia. So I went on the site and looked up this little organ in Merlinston and found that it was the sole surviving organ from the 1850s. It was built by a man in Paran. I've just forgotten his name at the moment, but it was built, he lived in Rose Cottage somewhere in Paran.
Oh, I've heard of him, yes.
And he built the little organ, and it's had rather a checkered career, but it's out at the church at Merlinston now. So having thought Merlinston should be recorded, I thought, why not some more? And so it built, and very fortunately, everybody said yes. The 2 cathedrals, the town hall, everywhere I recorded, there was no difficulty at all. It was very, very kind of them, and there were no stipulations put on at this time. That a couple of the times we recorded in the daytime, which was interesting enough. And when getting back to Merlinston, I had played some little pieces there, and because it's only a very small instrument, and we're just about to stop, and the recording man said, "Stop, there's something happening." It was a plane in its flight path circling around. Then when we got that one over, just ready to start again, there was dingle, 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 dingle. The ice cream man went by. So it had its moments of kind of pleasure.
Eccentricities almost.
Well, those eccentricities.
Now, you mentioned making some of the recordings in the daytime. Were you able to do that when you played the town hall organ? Because that's not a very soundproof venue, is it?
No, I was very fortunate about that. It was during January of 2009, I think it was.
The holiday period.
Yes, holiday period. The hall was being you know, what they do, they bring the lights down.
Yes.
You know, one of those huge lights, you know, it must be...
They're enormous, those chandeliers.
I felt I should jump in and do Venus arising from the bath, but I thought, well, perhaps not.
They go well with those Nathan Waller
yes, of course.
murals, don't they?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But it was the town hall organ was made available, as all the organs were, and just had the time.
How did you find that to play since its restoration?
Oh, it's very easy to play. I mean, the Americans, people won't always like this, but American organs are really so easy to play. Everything's in the right place. Whereas I'm afraid in many other organs, and I better not say Germany or England, I better not say that, they're not always in the same place, and you've got to get used to it. But the American ones, you know that all the couplers are going to be up over the top manual, and you don't have any problems. And of course, with the present day way of being able to set pistons and all the rest, it makes playing much easier. A two-manual organ, in my opinion, is much more difficult to play than a four-manual organ.
When you did the recording with the town hall organ, did you use the modern console or the original?
I used the one downstairs, yes, the modern.
Because that's easier, I would
well, you can
imagine,
hear what you're doing, and we were able to bring the console out right into the middle of the hall, and that was it. I didn't have any assistant at all, so I had to do quite a bit of it from memory, and my memory's not the strongest, but it was great fun to do, and I think it showed the organ off fairly well.
All right, let's get back to your younger days when you were starting to take lessons on the organ. So what prompted the involvement with A.E.H. Nixon?
Oh, that was really my mother's doing. She and my father, before they were married, and for a little time after they were married, used to belong to the Oriana Madrigal Society, I think it was called. And they used to do concerts in the Melbourne Town Hall, and the organist was A.E.H. Nickson. And so Mother had known his name over many years. And you know, as you know, the Town Hall burnt down in 1925.
25, yeah.
And my parents sang in a concert the night before. So, you know,
oh gosh.
So when Mother realised I might be developing as a musician, she phoned A.H. Nixon and said, you know, how she remembered him playing for the with the Oriana Choir, and he said, well, I'll arrange to hear him, and then I can let you know. So how he arranged to hear me was, I was doing my grade 2 piano exam, and he arranged to be my examiner, so he could hear that my fingers could move
and you
over
didn't
the key.
know this?
Oh no, not at all.
Just as well, you wouldn't have been nervous.
Oh, I think possibly. But I have found, this is just an aside, if you're really prepared, you don't get nervous.
No.
You only get nervous when you realise, gosh, there's something I didn't really work out as I should have. So that's how Mother phoned Nixon, and he heard me play, and then I started having lessons with him at St Peter's, Eastern Hill.
Oh yes, just across the road
from St Pat's.
St Pat's there.
Yes.
Yeah. And how long were you studying with him?
I studied with him for 1.5 years. Then he and his wife did their final trip to England. It must have been 48 or 49. So they were away for a year, and I studied with Bernard Clark, who was a Holy Trinity Q. And then when Nickson came back, by this time I'd realised, after 2.5 years, working in an insurance office was not for me. They gave me some nice promotions, but I thought,
and
oh
it
God,
paid the bills, but that's about it.
Doing this all my life, it's not what I want to do. And Mother said to me one day, do you really want to be in insurance all your life? And I said, no. She said, well, I've spoken with Dr Nixon, I've spoken to them at the conservatorium, you can start there at the end of this month. So I started the degree, no it wasn't, it was the diploma, about 2 months after everybody. But I did end up as second of the year, so it wasn't bad going, I suppose. And I also did my matriculation the same year, so it was a lot of hard work.
It's a big difference when you're doing something that you love, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, why did you decide to go to England?
Again, A.E.H. Nixon.
Yeah.
He said, you'll benefit from going over there. And indeed I did. It was a wonderful time for music just after the war. This was 1950. There were 5
Oh, of course, you would have been just before the Festival of Britain in 51.
I was part of it. Well, I mean, I took part in it. And saw the Skylon and went to the sound test at the Festival Hall, which is very dramatic when the man fired a gun and everybody applauded. I was expecting this when they did the recital centre, but it's far more up to date now. They don't do things like that.
No, it's all done by computers.
Yes, but it was an interesting time, as I was saying. 5 full-time orchestras in London, and as students, the RCM, if you went to the library at the right time and got on the right side of the very strange librarian, you'd get a free ticket, and you heard some wonderful concerts, absolutely beautiful. So we're very lucky. It was the whole of England, was, as indeed continental Europe, was recovering from the devastation of the war. And it was a long time for people to get back. I mean, when I went over, we had rationing, clothes rationing, food rationing. We were allowed, I think it was 4 ounces of butter a week. And if you were, say, invited away, as I was from fellow students, you went up to your ration office and they'd rip out the page that you would have used for that week and gave you a visitor's one, so you could present this to your host.
Right.
So, I mean, they couldn't, you know, it was sugar. I think it was just £0.5 pound a week. It doesn't matter to me, I don't use
I
sugar
imagine
very much.
tea and flour too
Oh,
would have been in similar
everything was...
situations.
And then the government of the day said, it can't be done, we can't stop it. And then a new government came in and they stopped rationing straight away.
Gosh, a big difference.
Oh, it was, it was.
Did you manage to get across to Europe very often while you were studying in England?
I went to France quite often. I went to Holland a number of times, mainly to hear organs.
Did you play any of them while you were there?
Yes, some big ones and some little ones. I can't
There's some
remember.
beautiful organs throughout France, isn't
Oh,
there?
there's some lovely ones. I've been on several tours with the University of Michigan as a student and played in many. I've played in Saint-Sulpice, Saint-Eustache, Augustin, in Paris, and of course La Madeleine, which is a beautiful. Played all those, and I should have done, as a friend of mine said years ago, I have somewhat regrets that I didn't go and study in France. My great delight is playing French romantic music for the last century and, of course, the century before. And I could have gone and studied with André Michal, but I didn't.
Any favourite composers amongst those French romantic composers?
Yes. I think I can always say Widor,
Yes.
Vienne, bit newer, a bit further along, Jean Langlais, and of course Messiaen. I don't play very much Messiaen, but I admire the music very much.
That's interesting to hear, because Messiaen can still divide an audience
very much.
here in Melbourne.
Oh yes, yes,
Yes.
I've been at meetings where people have got quite vehement, and I haven't entered in because I really feel that people who say these things aren't really understanding what Messiaen's all about, not trying to. It's a different sound, so I don't want to hear it.
I can remember, I think it must have been in 1988, when the expo was on in Brisbane. Dame Gillian
Weir,
she came out and gave a recital of Messiaen organ music in Brisbane. The hall was barely half full, but it was wonderful to listen to.
She was, you know, she was very close to Messiaen, and she did a lot of studying with him. I suppose it's really as co-people, they're both right up there as musicians, and she plays it beautifully. She really does.
And what prompted the move then to North America?
It's not a long story, but one of the students I studied with, he was along when I was with Bernard Clark, was Barry Cabina, whose brother started off 3MBS. Dare I say so?
Cabina.
Yes, Brian.
Yes, of course.
Brian started it off. His brothers were much older than he was, and Barry he came eventually to England, and he had an offer of a very good church position in London, Ontario, and we kept in reasonably close contact in London. So I said when I was off to France, so before I went, I said, if you ever hear of a job in Canada, let me know, not thinking anything. And within 6 months there's a letter from him, there's a very good job if you're interested. So I got in touch with the church and they with me. They said, yes, come and be our organist. So over I went to Canada, just like that.
And how long were you the organist in London, Ontario?
I was at this church for 15.5 years.
Oh, you must have liked it then.
I liked the church and I liked the people. Then there came a change at the top and I thought it was time to move on.
Where did you go from there?
I went to a United Church in a town called Kitchener. It used to be called Berlin before the First World War, so they changed it to
It couldn't have gone more in a more opposite direction if they tried.
And it was a very good choir, and I enjoyed the time there. Then a Presbyterian church closer to London, Ontario, where I still kept my home, came up and was only 17 miles, rather than 35 or whatever it was.
Yes.
And especially in the snowy weather, this makes a very, very big difference. So I was there, then I went to a Catholic church, and after that I got the appointment at the cathedral, as we were talking about earlier, in St Catherine's. So that was a big move.
Which city was the cathedral in?
St Catherine's, Ontario.
Oh, St Catherine's,
Yes,
Ontario,
yes,
right.
yes.
Right. And how long were you there for?
I was there for 6 years.
Yeah.
And we signed, the church signed the contract for the new Latorno organ, and I've been back many times to play recitals or for Mass. In fact, I played for 3 Masses there just this past summer.
Oh, right.
So it was great to go back to it. It's a lovely organ.
Now, you ended up at the University of Michigan.
Yes.
At some stage. How come?
Oh, that's an interesting story. We'll nip back to England for a little while. 1957 was the International Congress of Organists held in London. That was the Royal College of Organists, the American Guild of Organists, and the Royal Canadian College of Organists, all added to it. And I went to it because I was living in London. It was easy enough to go. And one of the organists who was playing from the States was Dr. Marilyn Mason. Now, I'd heard of her name because she was a very, very fine organist. And I met her. There was a garden party at the Abbey, and as happens in English summers, down came the rain, and we all scattered. We all scattered. And I ran into Marilyn, ran with her into the cloister of the Abbey and just said something to her, how much I'd enjoyed her playing, and that was it. Less than a year later, I was living in London, Ontario, and who should be the first organ recitalist I heard in London, Ontario? Marilyn Mason from Ann Arbor. So we chatted a little more. She was head of the organ department at the university. So we kept in contact over the years. I stayed with her and her husband on more than one occasion. So when I thought, it's getting on in years, I really would like to do a master's. And so I got in touch with her, and she said, she thought I was going to talk about one of my students. But I said, no, not about one of my students, about myself. She said, well, of course it can be arranged. Now, what would you like to study? What do you feel you need help in? I said, I've never done anything in the French classic period, so we did Cooper and Dandrin, a lot of people. And I feel I know something about it now. But my 2 years there, that's when I studied with Dr. Mason. Right. So we've remained friends over these. 2 years ago, a DVD was put out by the American Guild of Organists of her great contribution to organ playing and organ teaching, and I was one of the people asked to take part in it. So it was a real treat. The organ I mentioned recently at Ivanhoe Uniting Church, the organ at the Scots Church again, Douglas Lawrence, is very generous in allowing people to come in.
The
Rieger. Yes, very fine.
Isn't that a beautiful
I
instrument?
think it's one of the best organs in Australia.
I went to the opening performance with the organist from St Stephen's in Vienna.
Yes.
And Douglas literally had to drag him off the seat to catch his plane at about midnight from Tullamarine, because he was performing at 9 a.m. on the Sunday morning at St Stephen's. And he was having a ball on that instrument.
It's a very fine instrument. And I say the church authorities, they sponsor such a lot of concerts there.
Right.
And Douglas is very generous in allowing people to go and see him play.
It's good that they do use organs like that for public performances. I mean, so many churches, I suspect, see the organ as a part of the church, and that's that. It's part of the service.
I think that is true. Recently, the St Patrick's Cathedral and the Society of Organists sponsored a recital by Joseph Nolan from the Anglican Cathedral in Perth. He had an appointment to Her Majesty's Chapels Royal at St James Palace, and he has recorded at St Sulpice in Paris, St Augustine, and La Madeleine. And he's a very fine player. And the authorities at St Patrick's and Geoffrey Cox, Director of Music, have been most supportive. And it's great.
I can remember many decades ago, the ABC bought Marie Claire Alan to Melbourne, and she gave a recital
Yes.
in St Pat's. And of course the program had the obligatory note, "This is a house of worship. It would be appreciated if you did not applaud." You try and stop a bunch of music lovers at a recital by Marie-Claire Alan not applauding in St
Well,
Pat's.
you know, it's all changed now.
Of course it has.
I mean, as you know, certain things happen in a certain service, not mass, and you get applaud. I mean, why would they say that? I mean, when the Pope is carried in his sedilia into St Peter's, everybody's taken part, and you're clapping and cheering just to see him. So I think that was just a little of in-house stuff that got.
I suspect, although it was a long time ago.
Oh yes, it would be.
But I remember chuckling to myself because the console is not on display. You couldn't see the lady performing, and of course each time she finished the work there was a pause while she got down, and this petite figure would wander out and take a little bow.
Yes.
And Gordon, it really did sound magnificent.
Oh yes, it's a wonderful building.
It was wonderful.
That glorious acoustic and the organ, which is really, I suppose you say, it's a North Italian in concept. Germani had a lot to do with Fernando Germani with its specification.
Yeah.
And it was built, as you know, by the Fincham firm, using parts of the original organ, which had been put in another church whose name I've forgotten, but they got it back again, bits of it back again.
Oh, gosh.
It's a wonderful, wonderful sound. And on that particular organ, there's a harmonic flute that is built to the scaling of Kavai Cole. I think it was built by Robert Heatley of Australian pipe organs, and it is really a wonderful sound.
Now, somewhere along the way in your collection of composers that you perform on the organ, your own name crops up.
It does occasionally,
yes. When did you write your first piece?
Oh, my very first piece, I was probably 10.
How precocious.
Yeah, I know. I can remember the first phrase. It was very original. Da 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 dum 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 dum. My goodness, I stole the scale of C major, but that was my. It was all about a little bird in a tree. I can't remember its words. Actually, I can, but I won't embarrass myself.
Messiaen would have liked that. He was very big on bird sounds, wasn't he?
Very funny.
And you're still writing?
Yes, yes. I've had a commission to write some music for Carillon. Some 8 years ago, I was in Copenhagen, and the church, I've forgotten its name, had just a new Danish Carillon, beautifully done. You might have seen the name Maersk, is it M-A-E-R-S-K? Well, this church applied to the foundation for money to get this Carillon. It cost somewhere between $1 and $2 million, and the foundation wrote back and said we'd gladly fund it. And then, in parentheses almost, we are not used to receiving such small requests. It's a wonderful instrument, and I went up with the young man who's the carillonneur and the assistant organist to see what you can do on it, and I made a few mental notes. And 2 years ago, I was asked by Amy Johansson, who's the Sydney University organist and has just been appointed carillonneur, and she asked me for a piece for it. So I thought, well, you know, you can kill two birds with one stone. And somewhere in my study, I've got some more notes of what I should be writing, but I haven't got round to it yet.
Right.
But carillon's an interesting instrument.
What's the main difference between a carillon and the what we accept as a standard organ?
Well, you play it this way.
Yes.
And it's not.
When you say that, you play it with your fists
Yeah,
almost.
but it's somewhat like if you play a piano, it's gentle.
Yes.
And if you play a carillon, it depends how you. And of course, it's got a full pedal keyboard as well. And I was there in the summer, just before summer, and Sydney University have 3 graduations each Friday afternoon, and they go on for something like 2 months. It's thoroughly well organised. And after it was over, Amy and I went upstairs, and she played me some pieces, and then she said, "Why don't you go and see what you can do with it?" So I I played away, and there you could hear the people laughing, you know, graduation's a great time. So I played a little bit of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and there was great applause from down below, this in a hot summer's day. I quite enjoyed it.
Well, it makes a great change from Elgar's pomp and
Yes,
circumstance,
it
which
did,
you get at
it
so
did.
many graduations these
It
days.
was fun.
He also lived in the United States for a while. You were in Florida for some
Yes, I
time,
was.
weren't you?
I lived in the United States for 18 years. You see, when I went down to do the Masters, I'd always had friends in the States, and I thought, why not see if I can work in the States for a while? And it's very difficult to get in as a student. I knew of two people who had completed their doctors, one in medicine and one in music, and they were very highly qualified and very good guys, but neither of them could get into the States. So I pulled out one or two names of people I know who kind of high-powered names, and I got in without any difficulty.
Well, it's good to see you back in Melbourne.
I'm enjoying it, thank you.
And as I said, the CD has been out for a little while now, hasn't it?
Bit over a year, I
Yes.
think, yes.
It's got some interesting works on it. The Beale, the very first work, is a very grand work, but very contemporary.
It is. It was written by Gerald Bales, let me see when. I would say the early 60s.
Right.
And it was played by Dr Charles Peaker, who was at St Paul's Bloor Street in Toronto, a huge Anglican church. And it's a good piece. It's got that loud beginning, and of course you've got flashes of the tuba in the last movement, and that very gentle intermezzo in the middle.
Yes.
And it suited St Patrick's Cathedral extremely well as the acoustic. It's just the right stops for it.
It's an interesting CD. It's got something for everybody
I
on
hope
it,
so.
because there's some delicate pieces on it.
Yes.
There's performances on the organ at Scott's Church, we were
Yes,
talking
indeed.
about before, the Town Hall, St Paul's, and it also features one of your works in there too.
Yes,
So,
yes, that was commissioned by an organist in Ann Arbor, and I'm very glad that she wanted it. And she said she wanted it on the plain chant tune, so she asked for the plain chant tune, and I did it. It's not really following the words of the hymn at all. It's just my treatment of what I thought, what I felt at the time. The ending, which is really quite loud and works very well at Scott's, came only, this was the third attempt at an ending. I was sitting at the table over there having breakfast, and I don't usually read while I'm eating, but I thought I've got to do something that ending. We're recording it tonight, and I went through it and I thought that's not it. It needs a bit more flourish, a bit more excitement, and then you build up to the final organ. So that's how it worked out. It only happened on the morning over toast and coffee.
well, the DVD promises to be interesting. There's one of your works on that too.
Yes,
And
yes.
who else are you thinking of performing for the DVD?
There's a priest. He died. He was contemporary with Bach. Wrote nothing like Bach at all. But I'm doing some little Christmas pieces that he wrote, and he said, you can play them however you like, and I like when composers say that. So there are 10 pieces, not playing the whole 10. I'm playing a short piece of mine, the first organ piece of mine that was published, called Soliloquy, and it was written in memory of Dr. Charles Peaker. In fact, in the quiet section, I spell out his name, Charles Peaker, and then the Peaker again twice, and then it builds up to quite a big sound. Then it goes back to it's in ABA form, so it goes back to the first thing again. It's a very gentle little piece, and it works on a big organ or works on a small organ.
Well, I look forward to seeing the DVD. I've been speaking with Melbourne-born organist Gordon Atkinson. Gordon, of course, has spent much of his life in England and North America, but it's good to see him back here in Melbourne once again.